I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I'd married William and was the happiest woman in the world. Everything looked amazing. Until that day arrived. I cheated on him with his son. My life was flipped upside down by engaging in an apparently innocent game, and nothing has ever been the same since. It all began one sweltering summer. That same summer, I met William's son, Charles. Charles, with his wonderful grin and free attitude, moved into our home after spending several years overseas. One day, William left home early to go to work. His lengthy working hours had become the norm in recent months, and the night shifts left me alone for long hours that night, exhausted and lonely. I chose to go to bed early. I had a nightmare while asleep. Something was clutching me strongly, and I couldn't get free in the distance. A kind voice assured me that everything will be fine. That voice both relaxed and awoke me. As I gently opened my eyes, I identified a figure at the side of the bed. It was Charles, my stepson. Charles had always been a nice and attentive lad, so his presence in my room at that hour surprised me. I stood up in bed, adjusted my nightgown, and thanking him. I assured him not to worry about me. Everything was okay. It had simply been a horrible dream. "Why don't you sit down for a moment?" I said. We began chatting about him, how difficult the semester had been, and how stressful it was to juggle everything. As he spoke, I realized how much he had grown and developed. Charles wasn't the boy I remembered. "Thank you for listening, Susan. Sometimes it's difficult to find someone to chat to." I responded that I will always be there for him. As we instinctively peered into one another's eyes, that simple and honest talk reminded me of how much I had longed for such a connection. In the following weeks, Charles and I talked more frequently. He'd been a constant presence in my life. One afternoon, as I was cooking in the kitchen, Charles approached. He was on his phone, conversing with a friend over WhatsApp. It was about a challenge to try true love, which no one had dared to do before, and it sounded like a harmless game to me. He informed me he was taking part in a challenge with his friends. They say that if you kiss someone and feel guilty, it is because you love them. However, if you don't feel anything, you're at the wrong place. "What are your thoughts about that?" he said. The question astonished me. It felt as if Charles was testing something I didn't entirely comprehend. I laughed uneasily and asked him, "How do you intend to test that theory?" He said, "I love my girlfriend very much, and I'm afraid of jeopardizing our relationship." It was then that, almost unconsciously, an innocent, almost sardonic thought entered my thoughts. "I proposed that you win the task. Could you do it with me? After all, I'm your stepmother. If you kissed me, nothing should happen, correct?" To which he responded, "Susan, and what if you don't feel guilty?" To which I responded that I was certain I loved his father and that this was just child's play. We were facing each other, our gazes locked in an atmosphere that had suddenly become tense. I could hear our hearts pumping, my hands sweating, and my breathing quickened. We were both caught up in that moment, waiting to see who would make the initial move in my thoughts. I wondered why I hesitated if this was only a game. Why haven't I taken the initiative? I was the older person, with more experience. Surely he was expecting it. When I finally decided to move, Charles kissed me in that split second that seemed to last forever. I felt a spark that I had not expected. It was as if every repressed connection between us had erupted in 1 second. We parted abruptly, our hearts hammering, both of us aware that something had altered permanently. That kiss was more than simply a game. It was the start of something that should never have occurred. A shudder went down my spine. We peered into one another's eyes, and I recognized in his gaze the same yearning that burned within me. "I'm not sure what's going on, but I can't ignore it," he told me. His voice was barely above a whisper. My heart was beating as I struggled to find the appropriate words. He approached and hugged me without saying anything else. It was a loving embrace, filled with affection and yearning. I clung to him, felt his body against mine, and realized there was no turning back. The urge I had suppressed for so long suddenly surfaced. We fell asleep while hugging each other. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years, but also deep within. I realized that this moment of forbidden ecstasy came at a heavy cost. The weeks that followed were filled with mixed emotions and secret encounters. Charles and I made the most of our time alone in the house, ensuring that William had no suspicions. The thrill of the forbidden became stronger with each time we shared, sparking a desire I had never felt before. Every time we were together, we were encompassed by a mix of love, desire, and the continual worry of being discovered. We knew we were playing with fire, but the attraction we felt for one another was too strong to resist. One afternoon, Charles and I were in my room. The abrupt sound of the main door froze us. It was William. He arrived earlier than expected. Fear suddenly appeared on our faces. Charles had no time to hide properly. As William entered the room, he ducked under the bed without hesitation. My heart was hammering violently, but I tried to remain cool. "Susan, is everything okay?" William inquired with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes. I was simply relaxing a little," I replied, trying to appear cool. William stared at me for what seemed like an eternity before nodding and exiting the room. I waited for his footsteps to fade down the corridor. Before I let Charles leave, he was pale and clearly shivering, and a rush of shame washed over me. We had been fortunate at the moment, but we could no longer count on fate. It was evident that we needed to proceed with greater wisdom and caution. The following several days were fraught with stress. William became more attentive and distrustful, as if something was off in his thinking. Charles and I became exceedingly cautious, avoiding any blunders that could reveal our identity. One night at supper, William stared at me intently and said, "Susan, you seem different lately. Is there anything you should know?" My heart paused for a second. "No, William. Everything is okay. I've only been a bit stressed." I lied, attempting to appear believable. He nodded, but the look in his eyes said he wasn't quite convinced. The seed of mistrust had already established, and I knew it would be difficult to remove. When it came time for dessert, William invited me and Charles to join him in the living room to watch something intriguing. He turned on the television, frighteningly calm. The photos began to play in front of us, displaying each instance of infidelity with such clarity that there was no space for dispute. Charles and I were terrified, unable to find words. William gazed at us with a cool expression, almost happy with the success of his strategy. He stated calmly, "I always knew something was wrong." The anxiety in the air was palpable. William stood up and went out the door, leaving us alone with the weight of betrayal revealed. In the days that followed, I was forced to confront the reality of my deteriorating life. Charles and I attempted to continue our relationship, but the weight of shame and pain from having destroyed our family became too overwhelming. We ultimately made the decision to separate. Here's the next story. I knew my father despised me, but I never realized the extent of his anger until recently. Sperm donor, jerk, bastard. That is what I called him, because from my perspective, he was no longer my father. He was simply the man who impregnated my mother. So who am I? My name is John Sinclair, and Milton Sinclair is my adversary. Nobody dared to dispute this strong and imposing hulk of a guy. My mother named him her spouse. Most people outside our family thought he was my father. He has always put me down and belittled me in front of anyone who would listen, frequently with a sneer on his face. Not a day went by without a jab or an insult. He took pleasure in telling everybody and everyone that I was nothing, a weakling doomed to be a bad loser. Not only did he say it, but he also did it. He took great pleasure in shattering each toy I received as a birthday or Christmas present, frequently doing so in front of me with a horrible, twisted grin on his face. The worst part was what he did to the puppy my uncle gave me when I was 6 years old. After beating the poor creature's head in, he took an axe and killed the small dog right in front of me. I still have nightmares about that. Even worse, my mother did nothing to stop him. She was too afraid to confront the bastard and allowed him to beat and abuse me anytime he pleased. To her credit, Mom protected me as much as she could, spending countless evenings holding and rocking me as I cried myself to sleep. I envy every other boy. Why couldn't I have a father who loved me, played sports with me, or took me fishing and hunting? When I was old enough to understand, she broke down in tears and informed me that he had ordered she abort me. Despite his continued assault, she refused and suffered the consequences. She carried me to term and then gave birth. He retaliated by bringing women home to their marital beds and confining my mother and me to a guest suite while he spent his days and nights in the arms of other women. He got away with all of this because he was wealthy and well-respected by the community. He donated large sums of money to organizations such as Planned Parenthood and supported corrupt, wealthy politicians who frequently turned a blind eye to his antics and peculiarities. I'm not sure when it happened, but I resolved that one day I would make the bastard pay. I will never forget the day I first exposed him as an abuser. My instructor invited each of the children in our class to stand up and tell everyone what their fathers do for a living. One child indicated his father was an engineer, while another said her father was a police officer. I honestly had no idea what my father did for a living. So, when it was my turn, I just informed the class, much to my teacher's shock, that my father beats me. That night, we were visited by Child Protective Services. The scoundrel put up a fine front, waiting until everyone had departed before confronting me with his fists. By the time he finished, I had 2 black eyes, a bleeding nose, and a concussion. Believe it or not, the authorities believed him when he claimed I had slipped in the shower. My mother brought me back to health and enrolled me in martial arts classes. The man instructor I listened to attentively taught me how to defend myself. More significantly, Dad instilled in me a sense of self-worth and taught me that the bastard did what he did due to his own shortcomings, not mine. Oddly, he stopped beating me the day I cracked a cinder block during one of our demonstrations. However, the verbal and emotional assault continued. I left home as quickly as possible and joined the Marine Corps. I was determined to demonstrate the jerk that I was not a weakling. How did he respond? Laughter and scorn. You'll crawl back to me. You simply wait, he declared. I not only completed recruit training, but also graduated at the top of my platoon. I went on to become a Force Reconnaissance Marine, working as hard as I could. I was resolved that I would never be beaten again. After 2 exhausting tours in the Middle East, I returned home, met, and married Judy. I believed my life had changed for the better. I purposefully kept my parents in the dark about my marriage. I sent Christmas cards to my mother after I departed, but nothing else, and I didn't say anything about my personal life. Judy and her parents understood after I told them about my past. But he is your father, Judy said. No, he is not. He's the one who got my mom pregnant, but that is it. I don't want him within 100 miles of me, and I sure as hell don't want him to know we are married. I was sent back overseas for another 1-year combat tour. Judy emotionally pledged to wait for me, and we decided to establish a family when I came back. However, the jerk caused everything to go wrong. When I returned, Judy's parents welcomed me and drove me to their home. Judy's father, John, stated, I hate to tell you this, but your father tracked you down not long after you left. He dropped by the house with a couple of his henchmen and said he'd take Judy to live with him while you were away. What a jerk. What else has he said? I asked. He expressly stated that he intended to humiliate you and that Judy would gladly do so. Judy's mother replied, I couldn't believe it, but later told me that was exactly what she wanted to do, because your father told you that you needed him to do it and he promised to do it for both of you. What he did with your dog. If someone attempted to stop him, you may not have realized it, but he had just transmitted a threat to murder your daughter. I told them what he did to my pet. "I'll kill the bastard," I declared. "Please help me. I will murder him." "And she's toast if she goes along with it." "Thank you, John," her father answered. "Divorce her if you must. Kick her out. But please do not physically harm her. If what you're saying is true, I'll do everything I can to help. Judy may be a fool, but she is my daughter, and I don't want anything bad to happen to her. All fine. I vow not to hurt her unless she forces me to. However, if she gets involved with him, she could become collateral damage. There's no telling what he'll make her do." I told them they weren't happy, and they appeared to understand. "Now, please take me home. I've got things to do." Judy's parents drove me home and accompanied me inside the house in case she was there. The house was dark, and I heard nothing to indicate that anyone else was inside. A brief sweep of the home revealed that we were alone. I thanked them for the ride and pledged to keep in touch. They departed, but not without reminding me of my pledge, not physically to harm their daughter. I changed the locks on the front door and checked all of the other doors and windows to ensure they were secure. I didn't want to be surprised in the middle of the night, so I anchored chairs under the door handles to prevent them from being easily opened. I also installed traps on the doors to alert me whenever somebody attempted to open them. Fortunately, Judy was unaware of my gun safe, which was hidden at the back of a cupboard in my study. I knew the bastard wouldn't bother to look beyond his own arrogance and disdain. I decided to take advantage of those characteristics. I examined my inventory and saw that everything was exactly as I left it a year ago. I locked the safe and looked to see if Judy had left anything to indicate where she was or what she was doing. Much of her apparel, as well as her jewels and toiletries, had gone missing. Her lingerie, as well as the majority of her undergarments and shoes, were missing, indicating that she had moved out. She did leave a DVD on our dresser with a letter in her flamboyant cursive handwriting that simply said, "Watch me." I had a good idea what it was, but I decided to look it up anyhow. Judy smiled as the video began. "Hello, honey," she said on the video. "Listen, I know this will surprise you, but I've decided to stay with your father. I know you don't think much of him, but he has told me that I would be well cared for. You don't have anything to worry about. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but he promises I'll be a lot better wife to you once he's given me a few lessons. He has already showed me so much. Yes, I've been with him, but believe me, it's just closeness. I only adore you. Okay? Nothing personal, but he's here, and you're somewhere overseas. I understand you're over there protecting us from terrorists, but I miss you. And I'm very excited, you know. Sorry. Okay, talk to you later. I've got to go. Bye now. Bye." The next face to appear was the jerk. His leering mug took up the majority of the screen, so I couldn't see what Judy was doing. "Did you think you could hide from the old guy, boy? I thought you could just marry a female, and I would never locate you. I thought you were free from me. I will bet. Wrong. I have taken your wife, and yes, I've been tearing her brains out for the past few months, so have quite a number of my buddies." Oh, what a screamer. "Anyway," he proceeded, "she'll accompany me on a short trip to see some of my particular overseas clientele. Don't be concerned, she'll be fine as long as she's a good girl. Now, I know you're supposed to be a bad Marine, but I assure you that if you chose to play hero, I'll treat her the same way I treated that stupid little dog you had as a boy. Remember that?" I genuinely enjoyed watching the misery and horror on your face as I severed its pathetic head. "And don't think I wouldn't do it to your wife. Hell, I might just do it anyhow, after I've been with her in front of you. Check her out." He turned so I could see Judy, who was on our bed with two very massive and well-endowed black males, most likely members of the bastard security detail. The jerk looked back at the camera. "Oh, it's nothing. I have more vids of her. You should receive the videos in the mail any day now. I'd say she's basically wrecked for you," he replied, chuckling. "Oh, and in case you decide to remarry after your divorce from this dishonest wife. So let's just say I'll be back." The entire situation disgusted me, but I had to remain calm and composed. Crying and yelling would not bring her back, and it wouldn't take away the hurt I was experiencing from her treachery. I had loved the unfaithful woman for 5 years, and we were about to conceive a family. So much for it. It was obvious to me that my wife was now his unfaithful woman, thus divorce was unavoidable, and I would make the jerk pay. But first I needed 2 things, and I wanted them right away. First, I needed intel. Where was he going? How and when? He could have left a month earlier, or just this morning for all I knew. Second, I needed a backup, and I knew just who to call. I returned to my study and discovered 2 unused burner phones in my safe. They were more than a year old, but would get the job done. I activated the first and dialed my mother's personal number. I had the number from a card she sent me while I was abroad. Obviously, the jackass didn't realize she had it, or he would have snatched it from her. Surprisingly, she responded on the first ring. "Hello?" She responded quietly. "Mom, this is John," I said. She quickly burst into tears. "John, is this truly you? I have missed you so much." "Yes, Mom. Look, this is more than just a social call. My wife has been taken, and I need to find them. What do you know? I apologize." "John, he's taking Judy on an abroad trip. I'm not sure where." "So they have not departed yet?" I asked. "I believe they're departing tomorrow. He's loading his cargo ship tonight, and they'll sail tomorrow afternoon, I believe," she said. "Tell me everything, Mother. I need to know. Who does he conduct business with? Where is he going? What is the name of the ship? I'm not sure who it is, but he's been meeting with some folks from the Middle East. They all had Arabic-sounding names like Abdullah or something. And I overheard them talking about a sheikh. I'm not sure what that's all about," she responded. "It's not the sheikh." "Like a milkshake, Mom. They were discussing a sheikh, a prominent figure of some type." "Do you know the ship's name?" I asked. "I believe it's the Northern Express. At least that is what I overheard him say." She replied I was familiar with the ship. It was not a freight ship, more like a big ocean-going yacht with a larger-than-average hold. The jerk had a unique suite that had a helipad. I'd been in the depths of the nasty thing several times and was fairly familiar with it. I even had architectural blueprints that showed the vessel's layout. Those could come in helpful. "What is going on with Judy, Mom?" "Has he had her at his house?" I asked. "Yes. He's been having intimacy with her in our bed and has introduced her to those males. I can't believe he would treat your wife that way. John, I sincerely apologize. I had to question why he was introducing her to them, and then it struck me. He planned to either sell her to them or give her to the sheikh. Why are you putting up with this garbage, Mom? I asked. She sobbed. John controls everything. My money, even my right to eat and drink. I have no choice. I am basically a prisoner in his personal dungeon, she responded. Mom, how is his business lately? Has he told you anything about it? I asked, once or twice. He admitted that things were rough, but he had something going on that would set him up. At least that is what he stated. Why? Mom, I hate to tell it, but I think he's doing something unlawful. Do not say anything to him. And please don't tell him I spoke with you. Got it? Sure, honey. I will not say anything. What are you planning to do? She asked. I have no choice but to divorce Judy. I have other plans for him. Are you planning to kill him, John? She asked. He has given me no other alternative. Mom, I apologize. I understand you are married to him, but this has to end. Please do me 2 favors, John, she asked. Sure, Mom. What? Make sure the guy suffers till he dies, then return home to me. I'd like to see a video of him suffering. Promise me. She spoke with an edge in her voice that I had not heard before. You got it, Mother. I will be in touch. Okay. If you learn anything, please phone or text me at this number. Got it? I will, John. Be careful. I adore you, son. I love you too, Mom, I murmured, my voice shaking. I hadn't spoken such words to her in years. I took out the second burner phone in my cache, activated it, and contacted 2 good friends who I knew would assist me. Yeah. "Who is this?" said a rough voice on the other end. "Mike, this is John. I need your help." "Are you up for it?" I asked. Mike Williams was a former Marine who now freelanced for the highest bidder. He and I had spent a lot of time eating the same dirt in Afghanistan and other locations, and I couldn't imagine a better man for this mission. "John, you sneaky bastard, do you need my assistance? It must be something serious. You already know I owe you one, so of course." "What up?" he asked. I briefed him on the situation as promptly as possible. He listened and didn't say anything until I finished. "Do you know who we need for this?" Mike questioned George McGregor. "Do you know him?" The name doesn't sound familiar. I said, "I'm not surprised. I've worked with him several times since I got out. He's a good man who can also operate a helicopter. It sounds like you might need a pilot to get off that boat. In addition, he has contacts in places that you and I cannot discuss. I don't think he's doing anything right now, so I'll phone him and have him reach out to you. By the way, he does not work for free. Are you cool with that? I hope he doesn't overvalue his services, but I'm fine with it. Let him call me. Remember that time is of the essence here. That ship leaves tomorrow afternoon at the latest," I said. "I get it. I'll text you as soon as I talk with him." Mike texted me approximately 30 minutes later, saying to expect a call. Seconds later, my phone rang. John Sinclair questioned a man with a faint accent. Australian. British? I wasn't sure, but I figured it was George speaking. "Is it George McGregor? One and the same mate? A mutual buddy tells me you may use some support." "Yes, I do," I said. "Let's meet and see what we can do for each other. Do not tell me anything over the phone. I will wait." "Very good. Meet me at my home. I will explain everything, all right? Text me your address, and I'll be there in approximately a half hour. Make sure you have a cold one waiting for me, okay? I like this man already." "You've got it. I'll see you in half an hour." We hung up, and I texted him my address. I also texted Mike. "This is my place. 30 minutes. A half hour later, a Ford F-150 pickup arrived in my driveway, and a large man, whom I presumed was George, ambled to my front door. I opened it before he could knock and gave him a cold. Foster's. He grinned, accepted my beverage, and shook my hand. Mike pulled in. 1 minute later, I waved him inside, shook his hand, and offered him a cool beverage, which he gladly accepted. "I assume it's John Sinclair?" George inquired with a grin. "I had always wanted to say that. And your name must be George McGregor." I told them about the entire incident, including my friendship with the jerk. I even showed them a video. "So what are you planning to do?" George asked. Simply put, the jerk died. The more painful, the better. "I am divorcing the cheating woman. I told her father I would not intentionally harm her, but she could become collateral damage. I'd rather avoid it if possible." "Milton Sinclair is your old man, right?" George asked. "Yeah." "Let me make a few calls. I will be right back," he answered. Mike and I caught up while we waited for George to come back. A few minutes later, George returned to the living room and sat down. I believed I recognized the name, so I asked a few questions. "Do you understand? I can't expose my sources, correct?" "Copy that," I said. Mike nodded in accord. "It appears that your sperm donor, Old Man Sinclair, has piqued the curiosity of numerous alphabet agencies worried about his alleged financial relationships with some Middle Eastern groups, notably Sheikh Abdullah. Abdullah, by the way, is known to have dealt with a number of terrorist organizations and is thought to be in the business of providing guns to terrorists. He is also suspected of trafficking young and gorgeous white Western women, including your wife," George stated. "Why hasn't anyone done anything to stop him?" I asked. "A good question. It appears that the jerk has made a number of important and significant contributions to very high-ranking political individuals. If you knew their names, you would know them right away. So he is protected at the highest levels," Mike stated. "Very much so. And if he is revealed and/or brought down, many other powerful men will be mortified, to say the least. That means that, in addition to molesting children and stealing wives, he is also a traitor," I explained. "It also implies that simply killing him isn't enough. He must be destroyed fully and publicly. I tend to agree, George stated. Others do as well, but no one is in a position to do anything at this time. That doesn't mean nothing is being done. However, you were correct about the Northern Express leaving tomorrow. George said this while glancing at me. There are 3 covert operatives on the boat right now. They are due to weigh anchor tomorrow at 1800 hours and arrive at King Abdulaziz Port in Amman. We can only assume that Abdullah will meet them there. According to the manifesto, they carry dry goods, coffee, and the like. However, the operators claim to be carrying guns, ARCs, RPGs, you name it. There are also rumors that Sinclair sold Abdullah and ADM. Are you familiar with them? George asked. Mike and I shook our heads. They are also known as backpack nukes or nuclear landmines in current terminology. For 25 years, they were carried by your special forces known as the B-54 Saddam. In principle, the military stopped storing them several years ago. However, we've heard that some companies, like as Sinclair's, have begun producing them again on a very small basis. Of course, these weapons are what were originally known as strategy nukes, with a very low yield of about half a kiloton. In comparison, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima weighed around 15 kilotons. Don't be fooled by the low yield, however. A 5-kiloton bomb detonated on the surface would result in a fireball with a radius of approximately 197 feet. Everything within 197 feet would be immediately annihilated. Thermal radiation would reach slightly over 1,300 feet, or around a quarter of a mile. It would cause significant damage regardless of where it is detonated. If applied in a city such as New York, it would kill and injure countless, causing immeasurable economic harm. But how would Sinclair obtain the nuclear material? Mike asked. A good question. Stuff like that was not exactly sold on eBay. It would not be easy, George replied. However, given his contacts, he could most likely make it happen. Bottom line, if Sinclair sold something like this to Abdullah, he must be stopped. Understand? Mike and I nodded in accord. This was suddenly about far more than my erratic, adulterous wife. I assume we'll have no formal backup, I asked. Absolutely none. Thank you to Old Man Sinclair's connections. But believe me when I say that the entire intel community will be delighted to see Sinclair dealt with permanently. Can you get us and our equipment on board undetected? I asked. Yes. George explained that it is now being put up. Good. Okay, let's get started, I explained, rolling out a diagram of the ship's interior. We spent the next hour examining the boat's configuration and developing a tactical plan. We eventually settled on something that everyone agreed could work. So basically, we're going to get in and hide for a few hours until the boats in international seas murder the elderly man. Grab your soon-to-be ex-wife, sink the boat, and fly home. Is that correct? George asked. Pretty much, I said. Trust me. He'll have a skeleton crew and they'll be surprised to see us. It's not a large boat and can operate with a small crew. We will be able to take care of them quickly, and perhaps your covert agents will assist us. That is quite brave, if I do say so myself, George stated. What's the old SAS motto? Who dares to win? I asked. George smiled. Indeed, I respect your courage, John, but being SAS requires much more than that. Believe me, George said. I heard you could fly a helicopter, George. Can you handle the Airbus H-225? That is what the bastard now has on board the ship. He gave me a smug grin. There is no chopper produced. I can't fly, he explained. Good, I replied. I faced George immediately. I understand that you don't work for free. He looked at me and nodded. Normally I don't. I despise child abusers and cheaters. I despise traitors, and people traffickers are much worse. And don't get me started on those that mistreat animals. The truth is that I'm already under contract to deal with Sinclair. I am not at liberty to say who, so get me a cold one and we'll call it even. He spoke while extending his hand. I accepted it and we exchanged a hearty handshake. Thanks. We'll need some firepower. I stood up and indicated for George and John to join me to my study. I opened the gun safe and allowed them to look around. We'll need to rely on what we can conceal. Thus, I doubt the rifles will be useful. However, there is a good assortment of handguns and lots of ammo. Take your selection, gentlemen, I said. Mike and George went through my collection, each selecting 2 handguns and many magazines loaded with hollow point bullets. I reached down, grabbed a roll of slow-burning cannon fuse and 2 large machetes. "What is that for?" Mike asked. "I'm going to fire up the old man's microphone. Get that roll of great record and some blasting caps, too. We'll need it to sink the old bathtub." We gathered our gear and began packing. It was becoming late, so I decided to get some sleep. I showed Mike and George around the house, and we settled in for the evening. Tomorrow was going to be an extremely hectic day. I was exhausted, but couldn't take my thoughts off Judy. How could she possibly have fallen for that blip? Why did she have to disrupt our lives? Around 3 a.m., George's telephone rang. We were all woken awake. George went into another room to receive the call, and Mike noticed a square package on the floor near the door. It appeared that someone snuck it through the postal slot. He grabbed it up and gave it to me. I couldn't help but wonder when it was delivered, so I looked at the security camera footage on my computer. According to the video, a vehicle drew up in front of the residence with only one person. A man in a dark suit got out of the automobile, approached the door, and slipped the envelope through the slot. He turned around, observed the 2 extra automobiles, got back into his sedan, and drove away. George had returned by the time we got back to the front room. That was Juan Carlos, not his real name. He claims he can get us safely on board with our gear if we meet him at 16 p.m. tomorrow. On the spot, he also informs me that the other covert agents will assist us. The boat is now carrying 12 persons. The majority of them are orderlies and passengers. There are 3 security guards outside the old man's stateroom. Your wife is there, along with a few Middle Easterners. Most likely one of them is Abdullah. He tells me there was a celebration earlier. Perhaps that's what's on the DVD you're holding. So let's look into it. I remarked this when I opened the mail. I took out the DVD and saw Judy's rings were coated in a dried material. I inserted the DVD into the player and operated the remote. "Just so you know, John," she explained, "I won't be returning home. I'm divorcing you 3 times. I am now Sheikh Abdullah's property. I belong to him, body, mind, and soul. His cause is the same as mine, and my body is now under his power. I had thought you'd be here to see the ceremony. It was beautiful. And I would have appreciated it if you had been here to personally give me over to my new spouse. It would have meant so much to me if you had been here to see him take me in person. However, as is customary, you are too preoccupied with matters that are vital to me. Please understand, John, and do not be sad. You are a good man, and I will always remember you warmly. But I don't love you like that anymore. Maybe one day you'll find another woman and tell my parents they can't see me anymore. There are no harsh feelings, Mr. Sinclair. I appreciate attractive women, therefore I vow to treat your ex-wife well. She is an incredibly talented woman, and her physique is really wonderful. I, too, would have preferred you to be here to personally hand her over to me. But your father filled in, and for that I am eternally grateful. Perhaps one day I will be able to repay the favor. Maybe I'll invite you to visit us after she's had a couple of my sons." He said the jerk's face appeared unexpectedly on the video. "Just so you know, this was all approved by the State Department, so I hope you don't do something stupid. And I meant it when I stated I would go after any other women you become involved with. You are aware that the Middle East has a sizable market for attractive Western girls. Enjoy the evening with your Marine mates. See you," he replied, chuckling. The video went dark. We sat in the room for a few minutes, saying nothing. The video said it all, as did the rings in the ashtray. My wife was utterly gone, and there was no way to get her back. The rescue portion of our plan was complete. It was all about payback. Now. "I apologize." George eventually spoke, resting his hand on my shoulder. Mike responded, "That's so messed up. I am sorry, bro. You do not deserve that. Thank you, guys. I suppose you all understand what this means," I said. They both nodded in accord. No quarters, no compassion. They all perish. "Am I correct?" George asked. I nodded my head. "Yeah, she chose sides and she chose terribly," I responded. "What about the State Department? Can they really accept something like that?" Mike stated. George replied, "I've heard of some pretty strange things coming out of Foggy Bottom over the years, so nothing surprises me." I grabbed my phone and forwarded them the final video via email. It was late, but I had to inform Judy's parents that I owed them. "Yeah." "Hello?" said a drowsy man after several rings. "Fred, this is John. Sorry for calling you so late, but I need to talk to both of you right now. It is about Judy." I said, "What is going on with Judy? Is she home? Has she come to her senses?" "No, it's worse than I expected. I can't get into all the details, not over the telephone. I need you to check your emails. I emailed you a video, which I want both of you to watch. It's quite distressing, but you deserve to know what's going on." "Okay, let me start my computer," he said. A few minutes later, I heard audio from his computer, and they both gasped in terror at what they were seeing. Then I heard Judy's mother break down and cry. Fred got back on the phone. "John, I am horrified. I'm very sorry, son. I had no idea this was going on." "Who is this Abdullah person anyway?" he asked. "He's a terrible man, Fred. He funds and supplies organizations that are heavily involved in human trafficking, including enslavement." I asked. "Is there any hope for Judy?" Fred asked. "No, Fred, there is not. Judy has intentionally allied with a sworn adversary of the United States. This makes her an enemy combatant. Fred is a traitor. Think about it. Even if we were to bring her home alive, who knows what she might do behind your back? She may easily kill you while you are sleeping, believing she is fulfilling God's will or something. I am telling you this because I respect you, Fred. I think of you as the father I never had. You deserve to know that your daughter will most likely die, and if she does, she will serve the rest of her life in prison, and if tried as a traitor, he might face the death penalty. I stated she was our only child." Fred began sobbing. "Please, John, I beg you, attempt to bring her home alive. I'll try, Fred, but no promises. She may not give me a choice." "Okay, son, I understand. Please forgive us, John," he said. "Fred, none of this is your fault. I will be in touch. Sorry for revealing this to you, but I believed you deserved to know. Bye." I hung up the phone. I'd had enough drama in one day, so I chose to sleep before we left. Mike and George agreed, but we decided that one of us would keep watch until everyone was up and about. A few hours later, we were up drinking coffee and discussing our final arrangements. Today was the day that Milton Sinclair's reign of terror would end. We gathered our equipment and proceeded to the dock to meet Juan Carlos. We met Juan, and he brought us on board as promised. I gave him a roll of priming cord and a handful of blast caps. "Do you know how to utilize this?" I asked. He smiled. "You're kidding, right?" "Of course I do, and I know just where to deploy it. By the way, Old Man Sinclair has a working suitcase nuke on board. Were you aware of this?" "We suspected it." I replied I knew exactly where it was. "I will bring the stateroom up to you once it has been secured. Don't worry about the crew outside the bridge. My guys and I will take care of them. By the way, do you fly?" "Yeah. And certainly, we will give you a ride home. We travel 1 hour after leaving the harbor, so be prepared." He nodded. "I get it. Mr. Sinclair, please call me John. Is Mr. Sinclair the jerk upstairs?" I said. Juan smiled. "Got it, boss," he responded. We concealed in our allotted spots and waited for the boat to depart. We could feel the yacht leaving the port and kept track of the time. I knew the jerk would want to move the boat as quickly as possible, and I could feel the acceleration. Soon the hour was up, and I eased the door to my locker and looked around. There was no one in sight, so I started making my way up and was soon joined by Mike and George. We saw the bodies of a couple crew members and knew Juan was already performing his job. We just hoped the crewmen we observed were not the other undercover operatives. Mike headed to the bridge, while George and I went to the stateroom. 2 guards were stationed outside the hatch leading to the onboard residence. George dispatched one with a fast snap of the neck, and I followed suit with the other. They made no sound as their lifeless corpses sank to the deck. We noticed the boat slow down and understood Mike had neutralized the bridge staff and turned off the engines. That was our cue. We burst into the stateroom and killed 2 more guards. Abdullah stepped behind 2 of his guys, who were drawing their rifles. Unfortunately for them, they were too slow and ended up dead on the floor, followed by Abdullah, who begged for his life before being shot twice in the head. George covered the jerk as I emptied the rest of the stateroom. Judy screamed during the episode and grabbed a gun when she discovered her new lover had died. Shaking, she aimed at me. "Drop it, John, or so help me. I will murder you." She spoke shakily. Of course, she had no idea I was wearing a GoPro camera and recording her entire thread on video. I looked at her gun and noticed the safety was still on. Judy, of course, has never handled a firearm in her life. "If you're going to shoot me, Judy, you'd better remove the safety," I replied sarcastically. She took a quick peek at the gun. "I don't know how," she muttered. "So I guess you shouldn't be holding it," I said, firing a shot at her arm. The bullet creased her left arm and buried itself in the wall exactly as I had anticipated. Judy yelped in horror and dropped the revolver. "You shot me! I cannot believe you shot me! You could have killed me!" George laughed. "Trust me, Missy, if he wanted you dead, you would have died. There's nothing you or anyone else can do about it," he said. Judy's eyes widened in shock. "Yeah, I can't believe you did what you did either, so I guess we're even," I said. I grabbed her arm and threw her into a chair next to the jerk, who was, as it turned out, nude below the waist. "Well, I was wondering when you'd eventually arrive." The jerk spoke. I punched him in the face to get his attention. The move stunned him, and he hushed up. "Shut the hell up, jerk," I said. "Please tell me, wife, did you mean all that nonsense about belonging to Abdullah and his cause being yours?" I asked. She stared down at the floor. "Look at me, damn it," I shouted. Her head snapped upward. "Yes," she said defiantly. "He told me about how you and your Marines abused children in Iraq, and how he and his freedom fighters planned to kick you out and force you to pay." "Do you really believe that nonsense? Is this why you choose to be a cheating woman for this jerk?" I asked, pointing to the elderly man. "Not initially, but eventually." "Yes," she said. "So if I bring you home alive, will you attempt to kill your parents?" I asked. Her visage altered as she assumed a demonic appearance. "Yes. She claimed you were all infidels and deserved to die. And I'll do anything to revenge Abdullah's death, including killing you or my parents." I shake my head. "So, Judy, I guess you've decided your fate." "George, please tie this woman up," I replied enthusiastically. He spoke as I turned to face the jerk. "I need answers, old man. I want them now, so don't mess with me," I said. "Do you think I am going to tell you anything?" he answered. "Do not be coy, elderly man. Do you want to gloat? I know you do. You want nothing more than to tell me what you know and see how I react. Just as you did when I was a child. Spit it out, old man. Who do you contact at the State Department? Who granted you authority to hand over Judy to Abdullah? How long have you been sending armaments to our Middle Eastern enemies? Spit it out." I said it. "Okay, let me tell you. James Whitmore is my State Department liaison. He signed off on everything. And, just so you know, I've been selling armaments to Abdullah for the past 2 years," he explained. "Why?" "You know, that's treason." I questioned why I had done anything to bother you since your birth. "I was secretly hoping that one of the guns I sold would be the one that put a bullet in your head," he admitted. and that is why you have been abusing my mother and me for so long. Why did you kill my pet dog simply to screw with me? I asked. Your mother adored you and took care of herself from the minute she found out she was expecting you. After you were born, she coddled and breastfed you. I haven't even had the opportunity to touch her breasts since your birth. He claimed that you abused me because Mom was a nice mother. You are a nasty, twisted guy. Do you realize that? Furthermore, I discovered that abusing the two of you gave me a lot of satisfaction. I almost had an orgasm while killing your puppy. Did you know that? So, as you grew older, I had to get more inventive. Find alternative methods to stick it to you. I knew I could never beat you in a fight, so I went behind your back and worked on Judy, getting her hooked on drugs first, then on me. Then I present her to Abdullah. At first, he planned to farm her out to his friends in his organizations. However, after tasting her body, he decided to keep her for himself and began feeding her nonsense. Naturally, the foolish woman fell for it wholeheartedly, he said. Judy's eyes widened as the jerk confessed. Do you imply all of that was a lie to get me to hurt John? She asked. Of course. You foolish cow, you truly didn't believe I wanted you, did you? Now, Abdullah, that's another matter. He truly fell for you. Oh my God, what did I do? John, will you forgive me? She asked. No. Remember everything you just said? Remember when you had a gun on me? That is not something I can forgive. No. Judy, we finished. We're done. I turned back to face the jerk. My mother requested me to do her a favor. I asked, what is that? He asked. She advised making sure you suffer before dying. And that's exactly what I intend to do. I said. His eyes widened. I'd never spoken to him like that before, and the gravity of the situation was slowly dawning on him. I fastened his arms to his chair with duct tape and put on a pair of latex gloves. Then I took the roll of slow-burning cannon fuse and began winding it around his left leg just above his knee, leaving about a quarter-inch between wraps. I had just enough to reach his scrotum, which was ideal for my requirements. I took the upgraded machetes and made sure he saw them. I attached the fuse to the two explosive devices and positioned one on each side of his scrotum, one behind his balls and the other between his balls and penis. He and Judy both gazed at me with fear. What are you doing now, John? Please, son, we can get through this. Oh, it's son now, right? Where was the fatherly love when you murdered my dog? Or when you had your bimbos in your marriage bed? Or when you abused my mother and me, putting me in the hospital for a concussion? Or when you took my wife? Or when you agreed to hand her over to a declared enemy of the United States? John, please. Where did you get the inspiration for doing something like this? He asked. Remember the book you made me read as a kid? I'm not sure what it was called, but it was about a Waffen SS officer who joined the Foreign Legion and ended himself in French Indochina. Two of the main characters in the book tried something similar to encourage their prisoners to talk. For whatever reason, that scene has lingered with me all these years. Anyway, I modified it slightly, but I'm confident the ultimate effect will be just as unpleasant for you. You see, this is how it works. I set this fuse on fire, and it steadily burns around your leg, eventually reaching your scrotum for 2 more seconds. They erupt, effectively removing your testicles. What are your thoughts? Do you enjoy it so far? You will eventually die from shock. I am not sure how long you will last, but I believe you will be in agony the entire time. Needless to say, your days of fooling with other people's wives are done. John, is this definitely necessary? George asked. Yes, George. I am afraid it is, otherwise he won't stop. It's all over now, I said. My God, John, what are you? The jerk asked. Scared? I gave him a hard look. I am the monster you made, dear old dad. What do you think about that? I asked rhetorically. Please do not do this, the jerk begged. I remember asking you the same question just before you hacked off my puppy's head. That didn't stop you, did it? Karma is real, old guy, and it's time for you to pay the price. Juan and Mike entered the stateroom and took in the carnage around them. Juan was holding what appeared to be a reinforced suitcase. "What is that?" "Juan," George asked. Juan came over to us and opened the case. The inner marks confirmed that it was the ADMM device George had mentioned, with the exception of a numerical display counting down to 0. At the moment, it showed 1450 and was counting down. I looked at the jerk, who was now flashing me an unpleasant smile. "That's correct. It's an atomic demolition weapon, fully armed. And it was booby-trapped so that the second it was opened, the countdown began. Without the mystical key, we'll all be vaporized in under 15 minutes, and there is absolutely nothing you or anyone else can do to stop it. Not even I can stop it. I was hoping it might be employed at one of your overseas marine stations, but I guess that won't happen anymore, does it? Maybe the old man got you. Put it under Jerk's chair." I told Juan, "Light the fuse on the old man's leg." I looked at Judy as the guy yelled in pain from the fuse that had burned his skin in roughly 2 minutes. "Those machetes will go off in just 15 seconds. The nuclear device goes off. Do not worry, sweet wife. You will not feel anything. The blast from the nuclear will quickly annihilate the entire boat." I indicated for George and Juan to move away from the seats and told Juan to take the other operatives to the chopper. I watched George and Mike arrive to the helicopter and crank it up. As soon as those amnesties expire, I'm out of here. "We need to get as far away as possible before that goes off," I remarked, pointing to the nuclear bomb and counting down from Judy and the jerk. They nodded and departed. I stood at the door, watching as the fuse burned a spiral into the jerk's calf. Judy was unsuccessfully attempting to move her chair away from the jerk and the nuclear weapon underneath him. The fuse eventually burnt to the 80s, and the jerk's eyes widened with expectation. The devices detonated, blowing his genitalia into Kingdom Come and forcing the jerk to howl in pain. Judy stared at me, her eyes wide with dread. "John, please, I apologize. Please help me. Do not murder me," she begged through tears. I smiled and bid her a half-hearted goodbye. "Salute. Enjoy hell." "Cheating woman," I said, going away. Judy shrieked as I walked away. When I arrived, the helicopter had already warmed up and was ready to go. I looked back briefly before opening the door and climbing on, securing myself in the seat. I double-checked that everyone was ready before giving George the go-ahead. He fired up the engine and we drove off, leaving the Northern Express as far behind us as possible. "How far do we have to go to avoid an EMP?" I asked George. "Not sure. I hope it's a low-yield device. If this is the case, we may not see many, if any, significant EMP events," he said. George addressed everyone inside the helicopter. "When the device goes off, you'll notice a bright flash of light. Do not, I repeat. Don't look at the flash. Keep your eyes closed until the flash has subsided. Got it?" We all responded in the affirmative. "And brace yourselves for the shock wave. Hopefully, we'll be far enough away to avoid any damage." I checked my watch and realized that we had less than a minute left. I took a brief look back and could barely make out the boat. I looked aside and closed my eyes, just after the nuclear weapon exploded. A few seconds later, the helicopter was buffeted by what appeared to be a shock wave. There was no damage, but I could tell George was struggling to keep the bird aloft when the wave struck. I looked back once he had regained control of the helicopter. Except for a column of smoke and a little mushroom cloud, there was no sign of the boat. "Do you believe we should search for wreckage or bodies?" I asked George. He shakes his head. "Not necessary. How long was that boat? 85 or 90 feet. 3 of those boats might have fit end to end in that flame and been annihilated." "There is nothing left," he said. "I believe I did the correct thing with Judy," I asked. "She gave you no choice. You overheard her. You saw her with a gun on you. Even if you saved her, you couldn't trust her. Get over her, man. She didn't deserve you anyway." He stated so. "Where are we going?" he questioned Sinclair Tower. "As soon as we obtain a cell signal, I need to make a couple phone calls. How are you holding up? George questioned me after a while. I'm okay. You? He nodded his head. You're good to go, Mike. How are you holding up? He asked. Mike gave a double thumbs up. I'm okay. I'm a little shaken, but everything is well. Never had to cope with a nuclear weapon before, he said. Is everyone else doing okay? George asked the three federal operatives, who gave a thumbs up but appeared shaken. We eventually got close enough to land that I could receive a cell signal. I called my mother, John. She said, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, Mom. I am fine. I need you to go to Sinclair Tower right now. I will be there soon. Don't talk to anyone till I arrive, okay?" "Okay, son. Tell me it's over. Is Judy all right?" she asked. "It is over." Judy did not make it. She made a horrible decision. "Oh, and just to be clear, the jerk suffered. I have videos." I said, "Good. Sorry about Judy. I will see you shortly." The following call went to Judy's parents. Fred, John. I responded after he had answered. "Judy did not make it. I apologize. She made a really stupid decision." "Okay, John. Thank you for telling us." He spoke through his tears. The third call was sent to the chairman of the board of Sinclair Industries, which is based in Sinclair Tower. After conversing with his receptionist, I was directed to his office. "John, are you okay?" Bill addressed Haviland, the board chairman and a friend of the late Milton Sinclair. "Yes, Bill, I am fine. But Milton Sinclair isn't." I asked what had happened. He asked. He made a wrong decision and was burned by the nuclear bomb. He was prepared to hand over to Middle Eastern militants. I have footage of his whole confession, which occurred minutes before the device went off. My mother and I are on our way there now. I believe the feds are going through everyone right now. Am I correct? "Yes, John." He replied, "There are a lot of very concerned people here, and I am one of them. It's time for the truth." "Bill, were you aware of any of this?" I asked. "I knew about his animosity for you and his affair with your wife. Aside from that, I knew nothing else," he said. "Good. At least you'll avoid Gitmo. Make sure the feds are present when I arrive. I will explain everything." I closed the call and took out my reinforced field laptop. I took the SIM card from my GoPro setup and started editing the video, sending selected cuts to other recipients. Some of the videos were distributed to as many media sources as I could think of. Many in New York's media circles held Milton Sinclair in high regard. His revelation would go a long way toward undermining the public image he had spent years building. I gave Judy's parents a video of her confession, along with a note of sorrow. I did love her at one point, and I also adored her parents. I believed that, good or bad, they deserved to know who their daughter had become. The final footage was sent to my mother. That footage captured the jerk's final minutes before the nuclear detonation. She wanted to see him suffer, and she would get her way. We arrived at Sinclair Tower, where we were greeted by federal agents and officials affiliated with the jerk. We spent several hours outlining his plan to sell weapons to America's adversaries and convert my wife into a slave for a Middle Eastern sheik. The testimony of the three undercover operators was quite helpful. The feds were not pleased to find that someone in the State Department approved the measures against Judy, and I was guaranteed that the individual or persons responsible would be dismissed and charged. I was relieved to find that the feds would not take any action against me, but I was cautioned against taking such steps in the future. The media downplayed the jerk's death and the minor nuclear detonation, calling it an unusual meteor strike. They did, however, reveal his problematic background, including claims of child abuse and involvement with terrorists, whatever. He vowed never to bother or terrorize anyone again. I went to Judy's memorial service out of respect for her parents. I had her rings cleaned and gave them to Fred, something to remember her by. I said. He thanked me and shook my hand. We hugged, cried, and got on with our lives. But I'm still in touch with them. Mom never had a memorial service for the jerk. Instead, she hosted a party, dubbed Independence Day. Finally, she lit a bonfire with all the portraits of the jerk she could locate in the house and Sinclair Tower. She threw her matrimonial bed into the fire for good measure. I elected to stay in the Corps and planned to retire after serving a complete 30 years. I maintained in touch with Mike and George, and we're still great friends. I met and eventually married Meg, who was also a Marine. Her specialization was explosive ordnance disposal, but she also worked as a drill instructor on Paris Island. She, like me, intended to serve for the whole 30 years. She asked me once what had happened to Judy. "Did you kick her out or what?" she asked. "No, I nuked her back." "Seriously?" Meg never asked again. My mother was named CEO of Sinclair Industries, and with the jerk on the board, there was a major shakeup in the company as she drove out those who supported the bastard. She eventually saw the video of the guy having his testicles blown off. To her credit, she remained calm throughout. She grinned when he called me son. "I knew he'd eventually warm up to you. He only wanted to know that you would stand up for yourself." I suppose I would say he warmed up. I told her about 100,000 degree C. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.